welcome back to the realm of the mindful madman. This morning I was thinking about fiction books and then in fantasy and really that genre as a whole, and I had a thought that I wanted to share with you all. I think that more people would get more out of life if they read more fiction books. And when I say fiction, I'm not necessarily talking about the standard modern fiction, and I'm not throwing shade to these authors. Like, I'm not necessarily talking about the Colleen Hoovers or the Sarah J. Maas. Not really talking about those people, not that type of fiction. I'm talking more about the classic fiction, or the fiction from the olden days. I say the olden days, but it's in the scope of time. It wasn't that long ago, but you know what I mean. That type of fiction. The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings series, the Jungle Book, Three Musketeers, Count of Monte Cristo, Picture of Dorian Gray, those types of classic fiction books. The Stranger by Albert Camus, The Blind Owl by Sadi Hereye, those types of fiction books, the philosophical ones and the ones that have actual fantasy elements to it, even like Peter Pan or Alice in Wonderland, like those books, The Wizard of Oz, like those are all books obviously that were turned into movies. But I think that, I believe, at least for myself, that reading more fiction has made me a better writer. Reading more fiction books has allowed me to have a broader scope of life and the varying nuances within life. I didn't grow up as someone that was an avid reader. You can ask anyone close to me. That wasn't my thing. I think partially because the school system does a really good job at making a child hate reading, especially when they're forced to read something that they have no interest in. But even outside of that, I just naturally wasn't someone that enjoyed reading. And I didn't really pick up the like for it until I realized that, this could actually make me a better writer. And I used to write when I was really young, and I used to write stories on notebook paper. I can't find those little stories, and I was like 7-8 years old, so writing has always been a part of me. But there was a period where I fell off. But when I started to get back into writing again, probably around 19, 20 years old, I was in college, I hit some type of roadblock where I felt like I wasn't progressing, or I wasn't getting the most out of my writings, because I like writing poetry and short stories. But ever since I started reading more fiction books, and also reading more poems by other authors who have a more surrealistic, I cannot say this word for the life of it, surrealism. That doesn't sound like it's pronounced that way, but we're going to roll with it. A surrealistic view on life. I'm a firm believer also that when you think of the word fiction and fantasy, usually you like to associate that. I'm pretty sure the definition will say something that's make-believe, something that can never happen, it's impossible. But I'm a firm believer that it is the one thing that is impossible is to have a thought or an idea that didn't exist in some form before. So all those characters and creatures you would see, also Narnia, C.S. Lewis, those are classics, those as well. But basically what I'm saying, like, all those characters in those movies, the centaurs and satyrs and dragons and all those things, I truly believe those things existed at one point in time and may still exist. It's really based off of your reality and perception of things. Things that are more spiritual, I believe, they don't show themselves to the overly carnal mind. And I believe that when you are super carnal, you're overly carnal, you're unable to receive the gems in these stories because you just see it as just nonsense, or just this is just make-believe. malarkey or whatever the case may be, right? But I think that if as a society, especially this generation, especially late millennials and all of Gen Z, if you fall in that category, I highly recommend that you start reading more fiction books, like some of the examples I mentioned. Lord of the Flies, The Book Thief. There's just more coming to me, I just don't remember. But Les Mis, The Great Gatsby, like all these books that tell you stories about real life events that may happen in the world, but they put a fictitious spin on it so you have a better understanding. And that reminds me of, this is a sidebar, but it reminds me of when Jesus, or Yahusha, when he came to the people, when he was trying to give them a word, tell them something, he would always explain it in a short anecdote or a parable. Because I feel like in those ways of speech, that's when people really understand a message. And also in this world of censorship, it's pretty dope to be able to speak in parables and write stories that have subliminal messages that if you really read it and read it over, you'll understand without the author having to say it verbatim. And this is not to shade other genres, nonfiction, self-help, but I think with those genres, especially self-help, it's clearly based on the word self-help. It's entirely based on how you can improve yourself by giving you tips on just like little things that you can change, right? More of like looking within in a way. But I also think that with fantasy, it's also self-help, but it helps you look within from the perspective of another individual or another character. And I think that if you can see yourself in someone else and see and watch their struggles or read their struggles and then kind of relate that to your own life, it has way more of a profound impact than just reading a self-help book. And also like autobiographies and stuff like that, those help too. But the pool of fiction books over the years of all these amazing authors that they've written is so vast. And especially in the classical section or genre of that, so vast. There's so many stories out there that if you just read them, it could change your life. And I think also a lot of these books, although some of them, again, people may say are far-fetched because they have magical realism in them or fantasy elements or whatnot, they still have a human aspect to it. Even if it's a movie, or I said a movie, even if it's a book with all the characters being animals, they still portray personification and human elements that we go through each and every day. And I think that these fiction books, they accurately portray that. So this is just something that was on my mind, and I wanted to share it with you all, especially if you're a writer, a poet, an artist, a singer, songwriter, screenplay writer. Read more fiction books. Watch more movies too, but the books give you an extra edge, an extra, they give you more, just in general. And yeah, I really do think that outside of, serving the Most High and turning back to the ways of the ancient paths, and reading your Bible and just being a all-round solid individual, and not allowing the media and these new trends and all this garbage of the world to taint your spirit and have you become a carbon copy of what they want you to be. Instead, read more fiction books. Romanticize your life more through these books. It's not crazy. I mean, it may be crazy to the world, but this is the realm of the mindful madman, so that craziness, that doesn't faze us. But even if it was or it wasn't, I do think that is one of the answers to a lot of the A lot of the struggles that a lot of Gen Zs face these days, teenagers, young adults, just feeling like they're stuck in this matrix society, having to conform to just the mundane, monotonous daily routine. And a lot of us just want to live in our own fairy tale, our own fantasy. And you can do so without being unrealistic either. Because all these stories, like I said, all these authors that wrote these stories, they received their inspiration from something, an aspect of life that actually happened in este mundo, in this world, at some point in time. Whether it was an experience they had in their own life or they listened to someone else and their story shared something with them, and then they turned it into a story, a fiction story per se, if we have to use that term, changed lives. So this is my recommendation, to read more fiction, and you'll see how it really will impact your life in a positive way. You'll get more ideas, your imagination will expand, and you will start to view life a little less carnally and more spiritually. And you'll start to see that a lot of things that you think are impossible are only impossible because of maybe your environment or just your mindset and your perspective on what is real and what is not, what can be done and what can't be done. But when you enter these worlds like Narnia or The Hobbit, or where else? My mind is blanking. The Jungle Book, where impossible is so far-fetched that word doesn't exist in those realms. Peter Pan. Alice in Wonderland is probably my favorite Disney story, if that's considered Disney. But that's a topic for another day. But yeah, just read more fiction, and you really will see how it will change your life and your scope of things. And it'll also allow you not to take life so seriously, and to actually enjoy what there is to offer in life. But also you use wisdom and discernment to not get yourself caught up. But yeah, read more fiction. Not saying to neglect all the other genres, nonfiction, self-help, and all those. Those are great too. But I definitely think that fiction allows you to learn more about yourself and about the world in one book, as opposed to reading multiple books from various genres to come to the same conclusion. So I'm going to be definitely getting back on this YouTube thing way more consistently. I really do see this channel growing and building a community. I can't say that word right. Community that has no limits and bounds. We don't see limitations. We might see roadblocks, obstacles, but we know that we can tear those down. So happy reading to all of you. Let me know in the comments what you're reading right now. Doesn't matter if it's fantasy, fiction, nonfiction, doesn't matter. I just wanna know. Let me know what you're reading. Give me any book recommendations. Follow me on social media. Follow me on Goodreads. I'm on there. I'm on Instagram as well. But yeah. And one last thing I want to mention, as pertains to these fiction books, in my bio I have written, "An adventure awaits you." And I do also believe that when you really read a good book, a good fiction book, you really go on an adventure. You really travel to another world, and you can get lost in it, and when you come back to your world, your whole perception of what your life was can be changed just based off of a book that you read. And I think that that's the most powerful thing. You don't always have to travel to another country to be a well-traveled individual. Sometimes the greatest journeys are through these books. And that's not to say not to travel, because you should still want to travel in this actual world too. But for those that know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. I don't have to explain myself that hard. So, never give up on that dream, and never throw away an opportunity for an adventure, regardless of what it may look like or seem, even if it just means picking up a book and diving in. I'll see you soon.